In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Tonight, we gather once again at the intersection of truth, legacy, and lived experience. America in Black and White has always been a space where stories breathe, where history speaks, and where the architects of our community step forward to illuminate the path ahead. Our guest this evening is a son of Roxbury and Dorchester, a scholar, a builder, a cultivator of people, and a steward of educational justice. His journey is not simply a resume, it is a testament to what happens when brilliance meets purpose, when service becomes a calling, and when leadership is rooted in love for community. From the halls of Boston Latin School to the classrooms he taught in, from district offices to citywide initiatives, from recruitment pipelines to retention programs that changed the face of Boston public schools, his fingerprints are on the future of education in Massachusetts. He is a historian, a strategist, a mentor, a connector, and a champion for educators of color. And through it all, he carries the wisdom of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the enduring love of his aunt, Barbara Shepherd, two forces who shaped his compass and his courage. Tonight, we welcome a man whose life story reminds us that education is liberation, representation is power, and community is everything. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Rashaun Martin.
Good evening.
Welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the audience before we get into the show?
Well, happy summer to everyone, and happy to be here, and another great and successful school year, and just maybe a real thank you to all of my fellow educators, across the country, for all the work that they have done this past school year, and hopefully they'll get a well-deserved break before we get back again in September.
I know that's right. I'm really happy to have you here because I've had some educators from your area here to be on the show, and I got to say that the work that's being done around the country primarily, but in particular up in your area, especially with the men of color that's doing educational work up there, they're doing big things, and I want to give you guys a shout out.
Thank you.
I like to start the show where I like to give the audience the opportunity to get to know a little more about you and who Rashaun was before he got to be who he is today. And so, can you tell us, growing up in Roxbury and Dorchester, what early experiences shaped your worldview?
Well, I growing up in the city, in the 80s and the 90s, it wasn't the safest community, even though I think we really were working hard to sort of help the city figure things out. I had a single teenage mom. My dad was imprisoned. He was incarcerated at a very young age himself, and I was young, and so some of those struggles were real. So, but when I think about the opportunity to have just the greater community come out and support me from from the folks at my church, St. John, St. Hughes at the time, but now St. Catherine Drexel, the people in the neighborhood. A lot of them my neighbors, where they lived upstairs or a couple of doors down. Like I said, I'm extremely grateful for my aunt, who really took me under her wings, and tried to, teach me the way of the world. So I like to think that, when we talk about this whole idea that, it takes a village, right, to raise a child, I absolutely benefited from having this massive village to be able to give me just all the opportunities that I could have been afforded, and luckily that I was really able to take advantage of most of them.
So, what does being a Boston Latin School graduate mean to you today?
Well, Latin school is the oldest school in the country, and even predating Harvard. And it's a real privilege and honor to go to school there. You work really hard, you get challenged, you get held to the highest standards, with the hope that you go off to be successful in college and become these responsible and engaged citizens. And I struggled in that building, I think partly because of my circumstances at home. And so it was really hard for me academically at first, but I think with a little maturity, a little extra support from the educators in the building who really cared, some key administrators, I was really able to finish strong. So, I mean, I'm a proud Latin school grad. What it means for me is that it says a lot about the power of a high quality public education, which really every kid in America, should be afforded. And so, yeah, I'll always, be proud of having received the diploma from the Avenue. But it's still a very traditional place. I think there are some things that we in the school can continue to improve and get better at. I think especially to be sure that the experience for kids of color, and also for poor kids with limited resources, continues to be of great benefit by the sheer fact that they're in that school, because they're really smart and they're hardworking. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the building. And I'll say I'm blessed that my own two daughters are current students there. They work really hard. Their grades are better than their dad's. It probably really wasn't that hard, but they do extremely well, and they've taken advantage of all the opportunities that the school provides. My wife is on the faculty as a school counselor, and she has championed the cause of hundreds, if not thousands, of kids now over the last 20 years. To help them, just grow into the people that they need to become, and be able to help them, get admitted and enrolled into college. So really has become a family affair, and I'm proud to be a part of the institution.
Wow. So, if there was one thing that you could that you remember from back then that is everlasting in your life and your success right now today, what would that one thing be?
I would say that it's the pace. Life, and I think professionally is a real hustle, and you have to be ready just to keep up. And most of us will say, even to this day, that college is easier than going to the Boston Latin School. Sometimes maybe the workplace might even be easier than being a student at the Boston Latin School. But if you can handle the pace and just the amount of kind of work that you're responsible for doing, along with playing a sport or doing a choir like I did, and maybe trying to have an after school job or an internship or some kind of social life, just all of that you have to do as a teenager. Oh, I mean, it might, once you get into your 20s, it might almost seem it might almost seem too easy. So I think that would be the biggest. I think it would be the biggest thing. I really was able to build this sort of stamina and being able just to keep up with the pace of the world. And I really credit that to having gone to the Boston Latin School.
How did your time at Catholic University influence your identity as a historian?
Well, I mean, I was blessed to have one, at least what I thought, one of the great like departments of history that you could ever be a part of. The professors there, both the men and the women, just came with the historical knowledge, every day. They really didn't sugarcoat anything. They pulled back all the layers, came with all the punches, and I really had a tremendous experience. Not only learning about the history of the church, but then also learning about the history of the nation and of the world. I had a powerful civil rights course that was taught by a woman who had participated in the movement. I remember having a powerful Civil War class that was co-taught by someone from Massachusetts and someone from Virginia, and you just got both sides of the historical argument in real time, and it really was just impressive, And then you're right there in the heart of Washington D.C., and the staff was just so well connected, having access and classes at the embassies, visiting Capitol Hill, and just being able to engage and constantly immerse myself in all the things that were happening that were really bigger than life, in the district, as a student. It really was a powerful experience. And so what it gave me as I began my teaching career as a history teacher, this great perspective about our story, and that being able to share that to share that with my students. So being able to speak a lot of ways truth to power around some U.S. history, around world history, be able to teach religion, be able to teach comparatively, be able to teach philosophy. All of those things I brought to my classrooms when I was a middle school and high school teacher, and all of that came from my time at the Catholic University. I think I took something around 14 to 16 history classes. I mean,
Wow.
schedule. Yeah, just because it was just so good. I just couldn't get enough, and that included the other social sciences like minoring in philosophy, minoring in religion. I mean, I just really had the whole package by the time the 4 years were done.
Oh man, you know something? Let me tell you something. You better go ahead and do the thing. I like that. Especially when you're talking about doing this with philosophy, because philosophy is one of those things that make the mind really like think, 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 think,
Mhm,
think, think.
mhm.
And I think for those that don't know how to critically think, need to get into some philosophy and learn what that is and how that works.
Right. I mean, I was thrilled to be not only required to take philosophy courses, you had to take at least 4 of them. So I went ahead and took the other 2 to get the minor. But I always tell folks that, man, what a great thinking person's game. I mean, I just, and I never had anything like it in high school, even going to a school that provides itself on, that promotes itself on a contemporary classical education. We didn't offer philosophy class, at least, at least certainly while I was a student. So to be able to immerse myself in the philosophy of religion, philosophy of God, just all contemporary moral issues, just all of these great philosophical classes was just great. And the balance of the students. I mean, you had some of the most liberal folks in the room, some of the most conservative folks in the room, all sorts of people in the middle, but it was a safe space, and you just had to come with you just had to come, with your opinion and your journey and your knowledge, and as long as you could, I suppose, back it up, philosophically, you were okay, and it was good. Then you could certainly then, go hang out with the kid in the dining hall, afterwards, and there'd be no problem, and you get right back to the discussions, at class, the next day. Probably something that we rarely could use more of, in our current, dialogue and, in conversations as a, as a community.
Well, let me take this time to say that I want to thank each and every individual that's tuned in right now. Thank you guys for joining. And for those of you that are always here, I really do appreciate you. I have a comment here for you in the chat. And let me say, this is, well, I'm sure you know, this says, hi, Rashaun, keep up the great work. This is D Farmer 811. It's on the screen. Do you know who that is?
I believe it's one of my colleagues. Because the I don't know, the screen name based on the letters looks like one of my colleagues, who I think is one of the school counselors in the district. I casted a wide net. I thought my colleagues would be interested in hearing what I have to say. They've been very supportive over all the years of the work that I've done. So I think there probably are a bunch of my fellow yes, there's Deidre, yes, of my fellow Boston Public School colleagues who are watching this evening.
Okay, yes, she says Deidre Lewis Farmer.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another one here. I'll put that on the screen for you. It says, love hearing your story, Rashaun.
Yes, from Romy, who was a part of the JET program. So the journey in education for teaching, and they're a tremendous nonprofit organization that helps people, especially paraprofessionals, become educators. And I've done great partnership work with that organization over the years. You really can't get enough, folks who are in the business of helping people become teachers. Just because it's not an easy lift, but there are just so many people out in the community who know stuff, who work well with our kids. They just need to be encouraged to think about going into the classroom, and then they need to be given the right, supports and opportunities to be able to, get those licenses, that certainly the state of Massachusetts and all of the states require for you to actually be in the classroom. And JET is certainly one of those organizations that's that's leading the way in this work.
So, what values did your family instill that still guide your leadership today?
Yeah, well, I had these grandmothers, and they're both passed. My grandma and my nana. They always talked about kindness. Just sort of looking out for your neighbor. Taking care of those less fortunate. They were the consummate servants. And my nana was an elder care nurse her entire career, and she did it all the way until she wasn't able to lift the patients anymore. And so I always think about just the kindness and the care that my grandmothers had for whoever came through their door, no matter your station in life. And I think anyone in the family, would certainly say that if you needed a place to go, if you needed a place to eat, and you stopped by my nana's or my grandmother's home, they welcomed you. They welcomed you in. So being the servant, serving the people well, being kind to others, especially to the stranger, are just values that I hold, that I hold deeply. And then I think, how you carry yourself, just sort of personally and professionally. I think people will say, I'm always dressed. even when I was in college, I have my khakis, my polo shirts. They'd be like, Rashaun, you're always dressed up. I said, well, that's just kind of how I roll. But my grandparents would have it no other, would have it no other way. Maybe you have to be in your what they would call your Sunday go meeting clothes, and so that was always very 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 important. So and I think about my grandmother's all the time. My nana's been passed for a number of years now. My grandmother just recently in 2023, and I think the third and final thing is that they were very strong women of faith. And especially my grandmother who raised us, in the Catholic Church, following my great grandmother. And she made sure we went to church every Sunday, rain, sleet or snow, even if the car wasn't available, we get on the public transit and we'd make our way to the church. Even if my mom, wasn't able to get me there, she made sure that I went, and she was just a proud woman of faith, and the faith is a big part of who I am, who I have become, and just the love and gratefulness for God and all that He provides, and I very much get that from my grandmothers, and that has stayed with me also.
Well, here's another comment here. I'll put it on the screen from Curly. It says, thank you for your unwavering support of men of color in education. Your commitment truly makes a difference.
Yeah, Curly's one of my favorite educators. We've had a number of conversations about what it takes, especially to be a Black male educator and to work with our students. He is well on his journey, to becoming an education leader someday. And I've been really thrilled to try to help him, figure out how to navigate, these spaces. And I think he's going to be a great administrator, and he's knocking on the doorstep with some of the final things you have to square away in order to get licensed. And then I hope someone gives him an opportunity, because I think he'll be phenomenal.
Well, look, he can definitely get an opportunity to come to the show, Curly.
Yeah, well, that too. Yes. Yep.
How did your Aunt Barbara Shepherd shape your understanding of service?
Well, it's funny. I was just having that conversation about my aunt with my daughter today as we were walking along the beach here on vacation, and my aunt was really the great connector. She just knew how to bring people together. She never missed anyone, probably didn't miss a birthday, didn't miss a celebration. If you invited her, she was there, and she just had this ability to just hold space and just have this great presence about her when she was in when she was in a room. And she was a woman on top of her game. I remember her. I always tell the story about her sort of, plucking me out of my mom's home when I was in the 6th grade, because my bus stop was in between the two houses. And, when she wasn't married, she didn't have any children of her own. So I was kind of the nephew, but the son she didn't have. And she just wanted to be sure that, that at maybe 11 years old, I was on the right track. But man, did I get all of my sort of good home training, teaching me how to iron, how to cook, how to clean, all those domesticated things, make sure I could do them and not have to rely on somebody, on somebody else. Taught me how to do my taxes. Taught me taught me how to be ready for the formal space. I remember her sitting me at her dining room table and setting the table. All right. And literally teach me, this is your salad knife. This is your salad fork. This is your dinner knife, your dinner fork. You work from the outside in. Your glasses are always on the right, above the knife. This is where you put your napkin. All right. So, because if you're ever in these sort of formal settings, I want you to be able to handle yourself in the room. And I got a lot of practice because I was, because I was always her guest. She didn't hesitate to put me in a suit and a tie, when I was an adolescent and a teenager. And if she was going to an event, because she was a pretty influential person in the Mass General Hospital in the Department of Pediatrics. They kind of really called her the mayor of Mass General, and she worked her way up from from an associate's degree, at a community college, and she was closing in on earning her bachelor's degree finally when she unfortunately lost her battle to cancer. But it was moments like that to teach me how to manage myself in the world, especially in spaces where she knew that it was quite possible we were going to walk into the room and we might be the only people of color in that room. Like you mean, and so you have to be able to navigate, and shake enough hands, kiss enough babies, to be able to, to be able to earn your respect. So I'll never forget, just all of the, just all the work, that she did, and all of the experiences that she provided me, and my other cousins, if they were available. I was around the most, and just by happenstance. So when I think about all the experiences that she afforded me, that I think most kids growing up in the projects just didn't get. And it could be little stuff, just going to the aquarium, going to the fairs, going down to Cape Cod. I mean, just wanted me to know that there was more than just the bricks and the mortar and the monkey bars. Like, you've got to get out, you've got to get out of the neighborhood and experience in the world. And you got to do it early, sooner than later. And if you're gonna be ready for hopefully all the opportunities that that you will be afforded. So, I mean, truly the best. I mean, maybe one of the greatest of all time. And I am blessed to have had her as long as as long as I did. And if it wasn't for her unfortunate cancer battle, because she wasn't that young. I mean, she was a teenager when I was born, so she would really be in her early 60s right now if she was still alive. And I guess my only sad part is that my own daughters never got a chance to benefit from the presence of Barbara Shepherd. She would have been elated, and they might have, and the two of them might have been taken care of even more than I was. Quite frankly.
So, what lessons from your childhood still echo in your work today?
Well, doing your homework. So I try to just encourage all of my students to be better students than I was. I certainly remember that, especially when I was a classroom teacher, I used to leave my ninth grade report card on my desk, because ninth grade was where I struggled the most. I actually repeated the ninth grade. I'd struggled so much. And when kids were just up against it, I would say, hey, look at this. Are your grades better than mine right now? And they'd be like, well, yeah. I said, well, okay, then you're going to be okay. So I think some of those lessons of just needing to work hard still resonate in my work. I also in my work, and working with students and working with families, of just this whole idea of seeking out and taking advantage of just resources and opportunities. In a place like the city of Boston, especially, and probably across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we are not short of resources and opportunities. I tell folks that we are sort of resource rich, but at times we are information poor. There are just all of these sort of organizations and community connectors who want to do great work for our families and our students, but sometimes they just don't know how to get to them. And then there are so many of our kids and families who would benefit from all of these opportunities, that we have to afford them, but they either just don't hear about them or they don't know how to tap into them. And it really has been my life's journey as an educator, and especially as an administrator, to try to close that information gap, try to close that access gap, and just to constantly be able to say, you belong here. Even if you think you don't know someone, show up anyway. Make a friend, I mean, like, and you'll be surprised, who you may be connected to if you actually just put yourself, in the room. So I think those are some of the things that I learned as a child, or even sort of struggled with at first. That you just have to be willing to work hard, even especially when the work gets hard. Don't be afraid to ask for help. All right. People tell me all the time, well, how'd you figure that out? Or how'd you get? I said, well, I honestly just asked. The worst you can tell me is no. So don't be afraid to ask for help, and take advantage of opportunities when they are afforded, to try to or try to seek them out. And and you just have to you just have to continue to work hard. And I think those are the things that I've been trying to drive among students, among students and families, because I just assumed, and that was a big part of the reason why I even became an educator, because I think about the difference that just enough adults who cared made in the life of Rashaun Martin, especially when I was just up against it at times and nowhere to go, especially if that includes my aunt, or especially if I was just out of sight in some different spaces. I always assumed that there has to be hundreds, if not thousands, of Rashauns out there sitting in our classrooms. So what can I do to go and help to try to provide them with the same opportunities that I was afforded?
Well, let me just say something real quick.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you that are in the chat, I'm going to say this. I've said this before. Do not, and I repeat, do not put ugly, foul language, disrespectful questions in this chat. That's not what this show is about. So please, if you can't do that, then please remove yourself, because we're not going to have that. When did you first realize education would be your life's calling?
I was blessed to be able to travel. To travel certainly, but to have a number of opportunities in high school and college. I got some fellowships and some internships. So I worked in the federal courthouse. I worked in the Massachusetts State House. I even worked at the State Street Bank, which is one of the largest financial institutions in the world. I worked at the Liberty Mutual Insurance Company when I was in college. So I got a chance to have all of these different experiences. And what I really found, my Nana would have loved to have me have doubled down where I worked in the courthouse, because I think she wanted me to become a lawyer, But what I really found was that I enjoyed the academic space. I actually liked being at school. The work aside, no one likes the homework, right? And maybe the day-to-day, but I liked the environment. I loved the people. I probably liked and benefited from the structure, and I was just kind of a sucker for those things that come from school. I loved a good graduation, and just other field trips. Just this whole idea of what happens in a school environment. And there were some spaces, even though I could do the work, especially when I was at the bank or at the insurance company, that the cubicle just didn't have enough energy. I remember just kind of peering over the top of the cubicle and saying hello to a colleague, and they would just be kind of in their space doing their work, and so I couldn't help but just constantly walk around and try to talk to folks, and people really didn't want to have didn't really want any part of it. So I was like, there's not really enough energy for me in these spaces. So I think I'd like to go. I'd like to go back to school, and so that was a big reason of what brought me just into the space of wanting to be in the school and academic environment, because just because of the energy that it brings, and the people and the ability to have these conversations. And then I think just in terms of it as a profession, I really thought I could make a difference. And I thought I could make a difference for middle school and high school kids more so than college kids. And like, so that's why I decided to go into, to become a teacher. And then lo and behold, my high school came calling, the Boston Latin School, and they were encouraging me to think about becoming an educator as I was heading off to college. But lo and behold, one of the headmasters at the time had become the headmaster, and she was a big mentor for me. She's passed on now, but she was ready for me. She said, "Rashaun, if you're ready to come home, after you graduate, we'd love to have you join the staff." In fact, I've already gone next door to Simmons College at the time and talked to them. You should, you're going to go to grad school there. You just need to apply. And they'll be ready, and they'll be ready for you too. And I said, okay. So it's hard to turn down when you're only halfway through senior year in college. And someone has already said, they have a job in graduate school, waiting for you. You just have to finish your job, so we'll take it. And but it's been an extraordinary career. I've done it for 25 years now in some, various places in different capacities. I believe I've made the difference for countless young people, and then also for my colleagues, for my adult colleagues to become the best educators that they can be, and I just look forward to continuing the journey.
Well, so now I want to get the opportunity now to talk about the things that you do and why you make such a difference in your space. Let's talk a little bit about your work as Director of Student Engagement and Advancement. What does student engagement look like in 2026, that is?
Yeah, it's hard. I did this role for a year, and I was grateful. I was grateful to be given the opportunity, and I feel like what we tried to do was to really create a variety of opportunities for students to be able to not only engage with each other, but to be able to engage with the community. So whether we did it through sports and other athletic, and a lot of times non-traditional, opportunities, especially building opportunities for young ladies, and for little, and for elementary students. Whether we did it through sort of the college access, space, as we tried to introduce more kids to the ideas of going to an HBCU, and we even took a lot of students to visit some of our historically Black colleges and universities, and had some of them come, come here, and then working with a lot of our local community partners and foundations to increase access to summer camps and after school programs. I think, look, we talk about it every day, right? There's this whole fear that kids are just sort of hanging out on and behind screens, right? Every single day. Well, I think a part of it is because no one is going or is trying to help them sort of do something else, right? Because it's just easy, just to leave a kid on the phone, or to hand a kid one, right? So it's real work now to sort of play hard, and I think that's what our hustle try to be about. So when I think about the myriad of opportunities we were trying to afford, getting kids getting kids to Celtics games and to Red Sox games, and getting we brought a boatload of kids down to the opening National Women's Soccer League match. Now that Boston has a team, we were just taking all comers. If somebody called us, emailed us, and said, "Hey, we have an opportunity for kids. Can you get them there? Or can you connect us with the families?" We were like, "Absolutely," because we want our kids. We want our kids to do it all. And so just trying to meet them where they're at. We even had a great little program and partnership going where we were trying to close the gap around food insecurity, all right, by working with an organization called Spoonfuls, who was about not letting food to go to waste. So while they were collecting, food that couldn't be sold anymore legally, I mean, at least on the shelf from places like Whole Foods and Roach Brothers and Trader Joe's, they were bringing it to us every week on Thursdays and Fridays, and we were collecting it, sort of doing a quality sort, and then providing it to our families over the weekends who came to our programs, and we were doing that year round. So I think, if you truly want to be in that student engagement space, you just have to meet the kids and the families where they're at. And I'm proud to have been able to be connected with just a myriad of organizations around different issues, whether it be our friends at Youth Enrichment Services who are teaching kids how to ski and doing outdoor activities, my friends at the Ellie Fund, who provide services around folks who are battling, with breast cancer at no cost. And I said, well, I'm sure we have a ton of parents in our inner city Boston School community who could benefit from these resources, and they probably have no idea that they're able to tap into them. Let me help you get more connected to them. So whether it was a resource fair or a resource webinar, or sending out an email blast or an Instagram post, you name it, we were trying to tell people, look, we're here. If you need something, call us, email us. All right, we'll try to help you. And in the meantime, here's all of these resources, here's all these opportunities, here's all these programs. We want you to take advantage of all of them. And if you need our help accessing them, or if you just need us to come pick you up or send you a bus, to get you there, we're going to do it. And it was a load of fun. And it was different work for me after having spent the last 7 years in human resources, but I was thrilled to be able to get back, to the work with our students and our families in the community, and I think we really made a difference, and I just hope that we'll continue to do more moving forward.
So, can you tell us, because that's really good work, can you tell us what's the importance of having the students to learn about this kind of engagement, especially community engagements? What did you want them to get from that?
Well, I want them to first just know that there are people there who want to support them. I mean, because the isolation is real, especially if you're in a small family, or if you're just in a family like a lot of our families in the Boston schools or in the city, especially who might be in single parent households, or might be just being raised by a caregiver, whether it's an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, wards of the state. Some kids are battling homelessness. You certainly have our immigrant families, and it wasn't even easy for a lot of them to even come out the front door, let alone participate in some of our programs. So it can be an isolating, scary place to think that you have to do all of this on your own. So we wanted our kids to know that there were safe spaces for you to go. All right, there are opportunities for you to tap into, so you can meet other kids, who look like you, who might be in some of the same circumstances as you are. All right, so that you can make these connections, so that families can meet other families. The hardest part about being a parent, I think, in a large school district especially, is that a lot of times you drop your kid off, or maybe you put your kid on the school bus, all right, and then you come pick your kid up, or your kid gets off the school bus, and you might go K to 12 and never meet any of the other families, right? I mean, your kids come home every day and talk about, I met this kid, I met that kid, and they're thrilled that they're making this connection, but you never get a chance to be a part of that larger community. So can we provide more opportunities to do that? And I think our elementary schools are really good at it. Our high schools are getting better. Our family liaisons that all of our schools have now do a great job of just providing opportunities to bring community together. So I think that's the most important thing. I think kids have to know that community is there, and that there is a community for them. Judgment free. Accessible. Looking looking for them to be seen, and to be, and to be heard. Because I think we've taken that. I mean, I just think we kind of have taken that for granted. I mean, at the very least, if you're, I don't know, I suppose if you're 60 and under, I mean, if you're not 60 and under, if you're like maybe 35 to 65 and maybe older, what I mean, at the very least, you probably just had a lot of people around, right? Even if you were just hanging out on the stoop, you know, you know, right? And there were just a lot of people just on the block. At least there was somebody to talk to. I mean, like, even if it, uh, and I think we've taken all of that for granted. The village is super small. Families are smaller now. I mean, like, and yeah, and so I think we have to work even harder to let kids know that there is a community for them, and being able to either bring the community to them, or them to the or them to the or them to the community. And I'm thrilled by when I think about my own kids and the various organizations and programs that they've been a part of, over their K to 12 experience, and some of the friends that they have, and some of the adults that they have connected with, that really care about them, both in the nonprofit, and in the church. And I think that's a big part of just being able to help them understand how to build, how to build community. Whether we just brought them somewhere because we were invited, regardless of who else was going to be there, and say, hey, just go in, talk to somebody, make a friend, or some, or it's just some organization or some program or even some teacher just kind of recommending or reaching out, or just encouraging them to participate. And I think we just have to do more and more of that. And I think I'm proud that our division of student support has really tried to shepherd that cause.
So, how do you define advancement for students in the Boston public schools?
Yeah. Well, advancement was about, what's next? And so I spent a lot of work, supporting what's called our Office of College Career and Life Readiness, which really is the engine driver of the post-secondary experience, for our kids. So, we double down in really trying to get our students through, right, from K to 12, with all the supports and the love, that we possibly can afford them. But when they walk out the door with a diploma, we still have to make sure that they're ready for the free world. We can't just say, all right, Rashaun, it's been great. Good luck. We have to be sure that they're ready to go, that they have options. That they're connected, that if they run into some roadblocks, that they know they can come back to us to maybe help them, to help them pivot. So that's what advancement was all about. And I spent time trying to figure out, what are the after life at BPS resources available? Can we get more connected with our community colleges because they're free, right? Can we get more connected to our workforce development programs because some of them were free, or they provided a stipend while they were giving you on the job training? Can we get more connected to our unions, to say, hey, we have kids who have taken these great, vocational programs, and especially at places like Madison Park, which is our voc tech school, and can you give them opportunities, to come into your organization and start real work? Certificate training programs. There's more and more of those out there. You don't necessarily have to go get a full degree right up front in order to get a job. You can do certificate programs, especially in healthcare, because everybody needs an X-ray technician or phlebotomy, assistant, or even a nursing assistant. But now you can take these certificate training programs, to get some real skills. So that's really how I thought about advancement. Can we hustle to just build capacity on letting our families and kids know that these are the things that you can do, all right, in order to be successful, post Boston Public Schools. I worked a lot with our school counselors. They're hustling every day. A lot of them doing a lot of social emotional supports now, along with their academic and post secondary support. And because they're hyper focused on serving their students and families, which they should, they didn't always have time to do research and find other opportunities and programs that they could afford their kids. So I was trying to do that, and then just sharing it with them or helping them get more connected to spaces so that they could further support their students. Say, hey guys, here's another program, here's another opportunity, here's a scholarship. Please go ahead and share with your and sort of share with your families. So that was another just gap, right? When I go back to this idea of the city and the Commonwealth, and maybe on the post-secondary level, from maybe even nationally, that we are just resource rich in a lot of ways, but just information.
I want to applaud you and your school system because there's like, let me just say it this way. I think that for what you guys were providing is just what the kids today really do need, because those resources are so important. And so I think when you put back and you invest in these kids, you get a lot out.
Right.
Let me ask you, when you was thinking about these things and working around what you do as the student engagement director, were you thinking in like a long-term situation as to how you wanted this to go, or were you thinking of just starting it and then just trying to grow it out?
Yeah, so I think you have no choice but to try to do both. All right, so
Okay.
I'm trying to serve our students in real time, right? Because you have juniors, seniors, especially, or even or any kids who are calling the system. They need, they're in school now, right? And we say that they don't have time for the adults. They don't have time to wait for the adults to figure their stuff out, right? So we had to figure out resources and opportunities available in real time. Think about the ones that we already knew existed, maybe partnerships and programs that we had already created and have been going on for years. But let's make sure our families know about them, right? Because we add new families to the school district, right? Every year. Right. Especially with a transient population like we have, families kind of coming and going. So we want to be sure that they had the information that they needed. And then, yes, most importantly, how do we sustain the work? Right. Do we are there funding streams that we know that we need? And there are great organizations like BEDF, which is the Boston Education Development Fund, that are helping the district figure out how to fund initiatives moving forward so that they're sustainable. Organizations like Edvestors are sort of doing the same, and other partners, the Private Industry Council, just to name a few. So what partners do we need, and who? I think more importantly, because turnover is a thing in a large school district like ours, and a lot of historical knowledge for all sorts of reasons walks out the door every school year. So how do we be sure that we have the right partners and that we connect them to the right people who are on the ground or the right departments? Or give them the right information so that way, even if they have turnover in their own spaces, they're able to continue the work. So I think you kind of have to do. I think you really kind of have to do both if you really want to make opportunities work, for kids and for kids and families. The toughest part about being an educator, probably more so than in any other industry, every year that you do this work, you come back to school a year older, but your kids are the same age. All right. What you were able to afford, those, but let's say those 12-year-olds in the seventh grade, in 2001, or my eighth graders. I think about my eighth graders in 2001 who were 13, when I first started, and I was only 23. All right. Well, if I'm serving those same eighth graders now 48, well, shoot, I'm 20, to 25 years older, but those kids, they're still 13. Right? They're still 12, and they still have the same needs, or maybe even now, even different or more needs than my 13-year-olds did, 20 years ago. So how do we make sure that whatever resources and programs that were available that we know were good and worked, for those students, 25 years ago are still in play, and now those new eighth graders can get access to them. All right. So how do we figure that out? But then how also then we deliver on the new new skills that the kids need, and maybe the new problems or concerns that they have 25 years later, that wasn't there for those same 13-year-olds. And it's and it's hard work, but I think those of us who in it for the right reasons, we keep coming back to it because we because we love the kids, and I think we want to make a difference in the lives of young people, and we want to be able to affect the affect.
So, what systemic barriers are you most focused on dismantling?
Well, the majority of my work, when I was doing the educative color support and the retention support, we really was trying to break down some of the just difficulties that is happening for educators of color to get what they need, whether it be passing exams, whether it be getting the college degrees that they need, whether it be getting hired. Because we want to be sure that the hiring managers were considering the diversity of their staff. And we're obviously not talking about just hiring people of color just because they were folks of color, but we're talking about qualified folks. They were getting opportunities. So there can be a lot of unintentional policies and practices that are that organizations put in place that put up unnecessary roadblocks. So how do we just make applying for jobs easier? How do we provide high quality preparation, resume screening, interview prep? How do we be sure that we're recruiting in the right places where we're going to run into diverse networks, diverse applicants? Building coalitions. That was a big part of. We now have this massive Educator Diversity Act, that passed the State House in Massachusetts, to where hopefully the state is going to put some teeth around just encouraging districts and supporting districts to diversify their their educator workforce. All that data is real when we talk about if a student of color, especially a Black student, has at least one Black educator at any point during the course of their K-12 experience, they're twice as likely to succeed and to graduate on time. And so when you have some districts or some systems where over 80% of the students are students of color, and and less than half of the staff are staff of color, you have to work hard to try to close that gap. And not only do you have to figure out how you get people to continue to come into the space, you have to provide the right culture, the right supports, high quality professional development, opportunities for teacher leader, for teacher leadership, affinity groups, in other ways keep people connected, cultural celebrations, culturally responsive, instruction. All those things have to be in place, especially if you're working in a grade or sometimes in a school building where you're the only person of color. All those things have to be in place in order to make you feel like you're seen and that you have ownership in the profession, so that way you stick around, right? Because probably the average educator, these days may not stay in the business more than about 5 years. It's getting closer to being in the NFL, right? Remember they tell you that your careers are short. But we need our educators of color, and especially our Black educators, to stay in this game for 20, 25, 30 years. So how do we be sure we support them, especially to prevent burnout? Because it's not lost on the fact that, and partly because people get into it to take care of our kids, and that sometimes a lot of educators of color end up in some of our most challenging classrooms or in some of our most challenging schools. But they're in it because they know they can make a difference. But the burn and the churn can come quick. So how can we make sure that administrators, systems, communities, are keep an eye on those folks to give them what they need. So those were all the things that we were, that we were working on, over the last 7 years, when I had the privilege of doing the work in our human resources office before moving over to student support.
So, how do you elevate student voice in district-wide decision making?
Well, I think the district does a decent job at it. There are things. There are there's at least one student representative on the school committee, which I think is great. There's something called the BSAC, which is the Boston Student Advisory Council, and their goal is to try to get a representative from every high school in the city. And I think they're close if they haven't gotten there yet. And they do a lot of work to advise the superintendent in her leadership, on things that are affecting them as students. One program they did this year, which I participated in a couple of times, was that they provided student-led professional development for the staff, so people could sign up and come to workshops that were led and facilitated by the students around different issues that they were most passionate about, that affects their education. And the city as a whole, there's a mayor's youth council, there's a citywide youth summit that the city brings kids together to be able to engage with adults and sort of hold space and share their concerns. So I think we can always be better, right? Certainly, all of our schools have their student councils and students who sit on SPED packs and special education committees and who sit on school site councils. So there are a lot of opportunities for our kids to engage and to provide voice. Student surveys that they can complete about their experience. And the one thing that we actually get a high participation in, which has always impressed me, is that there's also an exit survey, for our seniors, just as they graduate. And I think the participation survey is well over 75%, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of the number of students who provide this feedback. And they also get an opportunity to share if they want to remain connected with us. Which I think is great. So I think we can always do more. You can't have enough opportunities to be able to hear from the kids in which we serve. They are the client, they are the consumer, they're the reason why we have these jobs. If the kids disappeared, maybe if education no longer was compulsory, meaning that they have to show up. If they could decide, to let's say to not engage, no different from not buying, from not buying one, from not shopping at one clothing store versus another, we would be in real trouble. And so I think adults have to remember why we're why we're there, why we're getting the paycheck, that we that we get. It's because of the students, and the best, and I think the sad part is that a lot of times I think we very quickly forget that we were once students ourselves. And so, I think, we have to constantly think about, well, what were all of the great things that our own adult educators did for us that helped us to succeed, and let's see how we can continue to do those things. And what are the things that we know were just crappy, or just downright stupid, and someone should have never done when we were students. It should be easy to say, oh, we're not going to do that again. All right. And so, but that doesn't always happen. So but I think we can get better at it if we just spend more time, listening to our kids. And I mean, across the board, there are ways to hear from our kindergartners, who are 3, 4, and 5 years old, the same way as there are ways to hear from our juniors and seniors.
So, what innovations are you bringing to the Division of Student Support?
Well, the year has wrapped up, and so I think some of the biggest things we were able to do is really just increase awareness, as I mentioned, of resources, create new partnerships, create just sort of new opportunities for students to participate. We had elementary sports for the first time, especially when it came to basketball. We were running enrichment programs on Sundays, just for kids to give, to have something to have something to do. Like I said, we were expanding our partnership and our network with our historically Black colleges and universities, and now more and more kids are interested in HBCUs. We went to visit several. I went on a trip myself to Delaware State and to Howard University, with some of our counselors, just to get more connected and our kids more engaged. Not really a thing, for those of us, who come from New England. Sort of historically, to think about going to an HBCU, but I think it's real for a lot of our kids now, and that's what we really have done, in our work of student support. It was a small team, but a mighty team, and folks just kind of hustled, every day. And I also think the work we did around closing the gap around food insecurity, working with our friends at Spoonfuls, was, I think, made a big difference. Certainly in this current economy, with the price of everything gone up and budgets being stretched, to know that there was at least a small resource through our department where our families could get a little extra if they needed it, judgment free. Just show up because your kid was coming to the program anyway, and while you're here, make yourself a bag of groceries, based on what you think you need. And and when we're happy to support you, and look, and we'll see you next week if need be. Come every week, if you need, if you need to, that's okay with us. So those are the kind of things that I think have made a transformational difference, and we hope that we'll be able to, they'll be able to continue that. I will say, I've been blessed over these last, 7 years to be part of the EPS. I am making a transition, from the district, and I'm headed to be the new director of education at the Willow Hill School, which is in Sudbury. That's about 40 minutes outside of the city. Smaller school that focuses on students with sort of academic learning needs. But I'm looking forward. There'll be different work for me, but I'm excited about this new journey, and see if I can now make a difference for the in the lives of these in the lives of these kids. So, but I'll be forever grateful, for the time that that I had in the BPS. I think I made a difference. I made a lot of friendships, a lot of partnerships. I think a lot of folks will be looking forward to continuing to work with me in some in some capacity. Glad I was able to take a little break. I mean, before I start the next, before I start the next journey. But it should be good.
Well, I want to tell you. First of all, I got because as I was just listening to all those great things that you said, I don't mean this to be offensive to nobody, but I have to say this, and I've said it before. Black male educators, especially the ones that have come here to this show, you all have a proven track record of nothing but results. Over the top results.
Thank you.
And what I'm saying is that, I don't know why is it that, this is not being noted enough, but, I'm sure that the audience that's listening now can go back just like we all can. Go back and roll the tape. And you will see that for the dozens of you that have come here,
yep.
my hat goes off because I'm proud to actually see the difference that's being made. But what I'm not understanding is why are the lead positions so few? And so, but as I see this work that you're doing, I don't know if it's regionally or not, because you guys, I mean, what you're speaking of, and now I'm down here in the Southeast.
Sure.
And so we know what that tradition is like.
Mm-hmm.
But from the educational perspective, you guys have got great resources that are actually doing things to expand public education in the way that it should be done. Have you guys actually done any like cross-regional work with other regions to kind of like help to some extent as to create the fruitfulness of public education?
Oh, we have. I mean, I will say, the BPS and maybe the Commonwealth. And I think all of us as educators who are blessed to be in this community, we pride ourselves on trying to be the leader in transformational work. So whether it's through the Council of Great City Schools or just participating in different national conferences. I mean, I know I went to an Ed Week conference some years ago called the Leaders to Learn From, to speak to a myriad of districts who are interested in our work around recruiting and supporting educators of color. So I got a chance to speak to a lot of different folks, both locally and nationally. When I was leading that work about, this is really what you have to do if you're going to build capacity, amongst your staff of color, no matter how big or small your school district is. And people tend to find us. Like, that's the power of the internet, right? Or is Googling something. I remember just getting emails from different, especially I think some of my fellow, Black educators, especially the Black men who would just send me an email and say, "Hey, Rashaun, I happened to see you on LinkedIn, or I found you on, or I was looking around and I found your work on the BPS website. I'd love to be able to pick your brain. I'm thinking about this project, or this partnership. Do you got 30 minutes for me?" And I think we would never tell anybody no, because we're all in the same business around student achievement. I think we might have differences in philosophy, right, about how we get there, all right, and who should be leading the how we get there. All right, but at the end of the night, whether you're a school district in Oklahoma or in Alabama, or here in Massachusetts, if you're in this K-12 space, we're all serving students, and so we all have to figure out how to get the best adults in front of them, how to get the highest quality instructional materials, in their hands, how to get appropriate technological resources for them to access the material, and how do we provide the right supports for our students who need the extra help, whether it's a learning disability, whether it's an English language learner, you know um, you know to be able to get the skills that they need to get, because society, especially in the corporate world, they always talk about, right, needing, or looking for, let's say, the future workforce of America. Well, where do we think it's going to come from? Or supposedly that's our job, right? To fill the nation's next courtrooms and boardrooms, right? You know what I mean? You know, uh, and we're supposed to be doing that across the country. So I think we should have no choice but to help, but to be in the business of helping each other. Of helping each other figure that out. And look, and I don't need, I don't need any credit. I would just be happy to, ultimately to know, or to learn, to see that you took even one idea that, that I had, and tried to implement it. And if it works for your kids, like it worked for our kids, and maybe I learned something from you too in a conversation, then we'll take it. And because the world is so small, I mean, I I think it's even more important, because what I'm doing and what we're doing for our kids in Boston, and what they're doing for, for kids in Washington State, well, it's more likely now than ever that those kids are going to cross each other's paths, right? Or
Exactly.
be colleagues,
Exactly.
right? Or be college mates, right? Or I mean, and so if we're not all in the business of properly educating them, then how are we going to help them meet in the middle? You mean, or be ready, or be ready to engage and to work with each other when that time, when that time comes. Because of course there was a time, maybe whatever, 50, 60, 100 years ago, where yeah, you could grow up, and be educated in Boston, and might never come across somebody else. But that's not going to happen anymore. All right. So I think we have to. I think we have to be in the business of partnering, and I hope we continue to find more opportunities for schools and districts and state education associations to be able to do that.
So when we chatted, we had the opportunity. I told you that we do Black History 365,
Mhm.
and I asked you, in Black History, who has been the most influential people in your life and career. You told me it was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and it was also your aunt, Barbara Shepherd.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, how has Dr. King shaped your philosophy?
Yeah. Well, I'll always think of Dr. King's just because of all of his messages about justice, and about taking care of the fellow man, and speaking truth to power and holding people accountable. I was thinking, and this whole idea that, that when he talked about, America, giving, black folks, insufficient funds, right? The whole idea that, they got a bad check, right? And I'm like, shoot, at this point, all sorts of folks have gotten a bad check within, insufficient funds. And just how do we continue to fix these problems in our country for those that we seem to constantly, um, you know uh, be left behind. And the message is clear. And for me, and I think more so, when I look at things as a historian. I mean, on one hand, we've had no choice but to continue to try to get to this, more perfect union. But we've sold ourselves short, in terms of, our just celebration of being the the land of the free, if we still haven't figured out how that applies to everybody who's here. And like and no matter how they got here, or why they're or why they're here. All right, it doesn't say land of the free for some folks. All right, it's supposed to be for everybody. And and how we continue to provide these opportunities for people to pursue happiness, right? And and have life, life and liberty. And Martin Luther King has brought those things up, all the all the time. And now we have a tendency to just to be cowardice about it, and hide behind the internet or hide behind social media. Spewing all sorts of hatred in different places. So much for being the home of the brave. All right, because there's nothing courageous at times about how we go about our business if we're just taking care of ourselves, and forgetting about the our common man. Yes, everybody needs to work hard, and we constantly hear about the pulling yourselves up by your by your boots, right? But some folks don't even have the boots. All right, we're never even given them. I mean, like so at the very least, that can happen. So I just I probably don't get as angry about it as my kids think I should be. I mean, I sort of quietly and in sort of a measured way, make voices heard, and try to make the difference in lives of others, and try to help people get opportunities and the resources that they need. But I think that's how I've been shaped. If you look at my high school yearbook, it just simply says to serve the public well. It's all I've wanted to do. If I can make the difference in someone's life, that's what I'm trying to do. If I can make today better for you than it was yesterday, or if I can make tomorrow, if God willing, if we get it, better than better than it was today, then I've then I've done my job. And I've always said, this campaign, so the Life's campaign, is not it's not about me. It's about it's really about everybody else. And I think because I have sought to make it about everyone else, I have reaped the benefits of life's of life's fruits. And so I think MLK has been on that message all the way to Barack Obama and everybody in the middle, for that matter, and that message of hope, and that message of serving and building up the greater community has always stayed with me, and has absolutely impacted in who I've and who I've become.
Wow. So what teachings of Dr. King resonate most with your work?
I'd say that I think his understanding about our folks needing to get a good education. I think even more about his own journey and opportunity, the fact that he was able to self-educate himself in a lot of ways. He was able to go to BU to get that doctorate degree, and how important having a good education is, I think especially for folks, in the Black community. So the fact that he was a teacher himself, and did it most powerfully from the pulpit, that really has influenced me. Has influenced me the most.
So how do you apply King's principles to modern educational challenges?
Well, I still think um, I, I I still think it goes back to community. I still think it goes back to to paying attention to injustices, right? This whole idea that an injustice, in one place is is an injustice everywhere, and so we have to constantly be um, upstanders um, uh, and not bystanders, because it's very easy, at times to, I mean, if you teach, very easy at times just to close your door and to go on, about your, sort of about your business. But I think you have to remain this open door policy. You have to be really an educator for all, even, in addition to those who just might be right in front of your classroom. You have to call out injustices, when you see them. So we should be doubling down on, on bullying and just and hate speech and just insensitivity. We should be just better at at celebrating our differences, um, and having more appreciation for various cultures. Maybe even encouraging our kids to to certainly experience other cultures. Maybe learn other languages. Connect with folks who just may be different. Maybe different from them. And so I think those I think those are the things, and if we can continue to do those things in our classrooms and in our school buildings, the world would be the world would be a better place. So I think most kids are just tagging along by what they see and hear from the adults who are who are in front of them. People don't come into the world racist or sexist, or I mean, like, or I mean, those are all
Yeah.
learned traits, or those are all experienced experienced traits. And if someone doesn't, either it doesn't stop you in your tracks, or cause you to pivot, or just give you a different type of experience or perspective in real time, authentically, I think early in your early in your lifetime, you can very much get easily set in your ways, and before you know it, you may not have experienced anyone other than yourselves, and that could be the case. I mean, regardless of your race, or ethnicity, and I think that's where most of our problems start. We have to get people together from the I think from the beginning.
Um, what did your Aunt Barbara Shepherd teach you about courage?
Well, I think they say when you're a black woman, and maybe especially here in America, you're working twice, if not three times as hard as everybody else, to get to the same place, or or have the same respect. And even when you get there, it's a lot of times it's still not good enough. So I just think that the fact that she kept that she just kept moving, and kept trying to learn and trying, to achieve, and really just trying to bring people together. It was yeah, yeah, just a courageous thing. I mean, I think just this willingness to show up in spaces that you potentially, may not belong, or at least on paper, where someone may just be wondering why you're there. But she was never afraid of just being in a space, because she knew that either she was supposed to be there, or she had the credentials, to be in those rooms, and she didn't shy away. And as a professional, I mean, she could hold, you know, and her herself and her space, and some of the most influential and powerful medical doctors in the world. There at the Mass, at the Mass General Hospital. But it didn't stop her from from sharing what she knew, and and being critical when she needed to be critical, um, and believing that she had something to add to the space, regardless of her own credentials, or background. So that's what she taught me. That never be afraid to show up. Always think that always think that you belong. Try not to back down to a challenge if you can. If you can help it, and be courageous, and have conviction in what you believe in, and what you stand for, and what you know is right.
So, how do you honor the legacy of Dr. King and Aunt Barbara in your leadership?
Well, I think it's about showing up, and certainly participating in spaces like this, Charles, and I appreciate receiving the invitation. I was humbled, quite frankly, when you first reached out to me. And I think and I think bringing people together. I really pride myself on being a connector. My colleagues, or my especially my colleagues, know, when I know something, they know something. I mean, as much as I'm able to tell them, because knowledge is power. I'm privileged to be invited to a lot of spaces, and if I'm able to bring people along, what I mean, so that they can share in the same experiences, or maybe meet some other people who are going to be in those spaces. um, you know, um, I try to do that. And I get asked all the time, well, do you know who anyone else who's coming? I said, well, not really, except for the folks that I invited. But but I'll just see who's there, and let me see who else I can, I can connect with. I tell my students all the time, I suppose your network, for the right reasons, can never be large enough, right? In a lot of ways, maybe your network is your net worth. I heard that, I heard that somewhere. And so when I think about MLK, just showing up in spaces, and not being afraid, to speak, and being able to get up in front of large crowds. And I love the people. The more people, the better. And it's interesting. I'm not even sure how good I am one on one, even though I think this conversation has gone well. All right, but give me a lot of people, and I'm very comfortable, in those spaces. And then and I think just showing up, and that's something I've always told my students. It's advice I really gave them as even as they were leaving high school. I said at the very least, just show up. All right, if you're invited to something, for the right reasons, just show up. Hold space. I think that's the most important thing you can do. It builds trust. It builds relationships. It really can be half the battle. So as long as God, provides me, with the health and the energy to continue to, to keep showing up in various spaces on behalf of the people, I'll continue to do so.
Final question for you.
Sure.
What does Black excellence mean to you?
Yeah, well, I have seen my share. I was privileged to receive a Black excellence recognition from the Massachusetts House of Representatives, and the Senate, and through their Black congressional caucus. And I've spent enough vacation time on Martha's Vineyard, to see to see a ton of Black excellence and the Black bourgeoisie, walk around the island, which is great. I think our Black excellence is really found in our care for others, in our ability to bring together community, in our ability to to just sort of treat people well, the kindness, the breaking bread together, we know the power of bringing people around a meal and being able to have conversation. Um, our, our spirit, when we add our music and our art and our talents, to spaces, especially I think especially the non-black spaces, and when you come to a Black Catholic church, it's different from going to the white Catholic church. I mean, but it's the same music, same prayers, but there's just something about bringing that cultural energy, and and I think, and that's true excellence. Black is beautiful. I don't think we're proud enough. I don't. We need to just shout it more from the rooftops. I think we need to support each other more. Support Black businesses, show up in Black spaces. Because if sort of not us, then who? If not now, right? Then when? And I think if we can get better at just lifting up our community. All right. And look, and not that we have to think about everybody else. All right. Because that's not how we were raised. Right. We're still looking out for folks. Even if people aren't looking out for us, we're still looking out for folks. Because we were just raised properly. Right. As our aunts and our grandmothers would tell us. But I do think we could do a better job with lifting up our own community, and if we do that more and more, I think the excellence will only get the excellence will only get better.
Well, I want to thank you for that, because that's exactly what we do here.
Yeah.
And so, in closing, do you have any words of wisdom and encouragement for our audience? Tell them how they can connect with you via your social media, any websites, or anything you'd like for them to know.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm thrilled and honored and privileged for all of you who have sat, really have given you a good amount of your time. Grant that it's a Monday evening, but it's the summer. You could be doing a ton of stuff, on a nice, beautiful evening, at least like it is here in Massachusetts. So I really appreciate you giving me up your time. I hope that our conversation and whatever ideas or messages or the work that we've been trying to do in education has resonated with you, especially for my fellow educators. Just know that I'm proud of you. I know how hard the work is. I know how tired you can be. I know how under-resourced you can be. You're probably not even paid as well as you think you should be. But know that I see you. I'm here for you. I support you. And but please rest. Please relax. Please reflect. Take advantage of this time to re-energize yourself. So that way we're ready to get back to the work in late August, early September. Our kids need us, and remember, we'll be a year older, but our kids will be the same age. All right. So you got to bring the energy. Yes, and feel free to to find me on LinkedIn. It's a space that I sit in. Often just trying to share, different places and spaces that I'm a part of, as I continue, as I continue my journey, and like I said, I'll be forever grateful, for my time at the Boston Public Schools. I thank them for giving me the opportunity. I was honored to not only have worked with them and to have served with them, but to serve for them, and I look forward to my new role as the director of education at the Willow Hill School in Sudbury. When I return from vacation this summer, and I just thank you all very much, and thank you for your time, and God bless you all.
So, when before I close the show, let me just ask you: do you have a couple of minutes after I close the show?
I do. Yes.
First, I want to thank each and every individual that's been here this evening, that's watched this show, and I hope that you guys got a great message and learned a lot about what it is to build community via education. Because this work that Rashaun is doing are the things that we all should at least try. Get down into that grind and let's make this thing work, because if we don't do it for ourselves, no one else is going to do it. And I definitely appreciate the work that he's doing. And I appreciate you guys for being here. But for those of you that are watching on all of our channels, especially our YouTube channels, if you have not yet subscribed and enabled notifications, I ask if you could please support us by subscribing, enabling all notifications where we're doing, when the show is going live, you'll be able to catch the shows live. When we do all of our posts, you'll be able to catch all the posts, as well as you're able to go back and watch each and every interview, where each and every guest has left his or her thumbprint on work that's being done in the community, and we all should do our part to build our communities. So in closing, tonight's conversation reminds us that leadership is not a title. It is a commitment. It is the willingness to build, to uplift, to challenge systems, and to stand firm in the belief that every child deserves a future shaped by possibility rather than limitations. Rashaun Martin embodies that commitment. His work is a living blueprint for what happens when excellence meets purpose, when history informs action, and when community becomes the heartbeat of leadership. As we close, let us carry forward the lessons of Dr. King, the love of Aunt Barbara, and the unwavering truth that education is liberation. This has been America in Black and White, and tonight we didn't just hear a story, we witnessed a legacy in motion. Good night, you all. Please come back and see us tomorrow night as we have another great show for you. Have a great evening.